In the past two episodes, we went through how I use the data hub and a brief approach to player development in the lower leagues. We also played a couple matches as this is Sunday League to Legend, a series based on a lower league save with Leamington FC. Now since the last one, we've played a couple more behind the scenes, and as you can see, the results have been pretty good. A lot of wins in the mix here and not many goals conceded, which is definitely part of the plan when we made those tactical changes post the data analysis. Now, the one worrying thing is that over the recent past, we have not been scoring as many goals as we did earlier in the season. A lot of big results like a 4-1 here against Truro and a 7-3 against South Shields. And this has made me want to do something about my tactics yet again. So for today, we're going to look at tactics in depth, plus play one more match, and this time it'll come up against Hereford in the National League North. So let's roll the intro and get straight back to it. So here we go then, the tactics screen. Now you can develop players as much as you'd like, go through training as rigorously as you want, send scouts from Mexico to Mars, and find as many good players as you want. If your tactics are shite, your save is going to need someone to save it. Now today, the plan is for me to give you something of an approach to how to go about setting a tactic that is best for you. To both new and seasoned FM players, tactics can be a bit of a nightmare. Now, thankfully, there are a ton of resources available online, and I'll pop a lot of those in the description and maybe even make a future video about it that can help you along your process. But the primary goal today is to find out how to start for yourself. And we'll start off by asking ourselves three very simple but super important questions that will define how much joy you get from the game. So when you jump into a new save, whether you start unemployed, you're going on a journeyman save, or you're starting at a big club, first question is, what do you have at hand? And what I mean by this is, what are the resources available to you? What's in your playing squad currently? I think it's a brilliant starting point to begin the development of your tactic based on the best players that you have at hand already. Of course, in the save as of current, I've adapted my playing squad to suit my tactic. But at the very start, things might look a little bit different. Something like this. What are we going to get? Okay, so we've got players for every position basically, but look at the keeper situation. Now this is an absolute nightmare. Of course, with our big boy keeper, where is he? Callum Hawkins, there we are. He is injured for quite a bit of time. So we tied down to pay a guy that doesn't play. Oh, this is some Jadon Sancho 300k a week for doing nothing bullshit. Oh, God. Okay. It starts off pretty nicely, as is all non-league saves, and we're gonna find a way around it. But for now, I think we're getting somewhere. Okay. Now, for once, the star ratings are very valuable here, and the best players should definitely be in the starting 11. Perhaps you have three very good strikers. What's the point of playing a 4-2-3-1, which leaves two of them on the bench? So once you've identified where your key players lie, make sure that you can include most of them in the starting 11. And that will be the start. Now, the next question to ask yourself is, what do you want? Maybe there's a particular tactical style that you really identify with. Perhaps you've grown up watching Total Football or an evolution of that like Tiki-Taka. Maybe you're more into a hardcore playing style like the Gegenpress, or you want to sit back and be really defensively solid like a Catenaccio. Now, the answer to this is perhaps the thing that influences my tactical choice the most. Now, you could go ahead, find a meta tactic, plug and play and get all the results that you desire. But are you going to be truly happy in seeing a team that plays like nothing that you really want them to? For me, much of the joy that I get from the game is getting results from a tactical system that feels like my own. If I want my team to play in a particular style and they win going about it in a totally different way, it kind of feels like a fluke, like a result that I didn't truly engineer. And of course, Football Manager is all about finding a way to engineer results so that you can live out your football management dreams. Now, the next part is, what are your goals for your team at the current point in time? Now, this is equally important. Maybe for some reason, you're not trying to win the league this year. Maybe you're bringing through a whole bunch of youth players that you want to see dominate in a few seasons. Or maybe you're trying to absolutely smack it this season and score 100 goals in the league. Maybe you're trying to be defensively sound and have a team that doesn't concede too many. Or maybe you're trying to have a team that scores the most headers in the league. Whatever your fancy is, by answering this question as honestly as you can, you're probably going to go ahead and find a tactic that truly allows you to enjoy the game. Now, the last question, which can often bring you back down to earth, is what can you get? And what I mean by this is, what do you have at hand in terms of financial resources, club reputation, and other pull that can allow you to bring in the necessary tools that will allow you to execute the tactical plan that you are about to develop. Now, I'm going to go ahead and develop a tactic based on a hypothetical scenario and my answers to those 3 questions. So let's use this brief as an example. We are a club in significant debt. We've just been promoted up a division through some expert managing from our gaffer. And now we need to go ahead and create a tactic that keeps us in the division. The media has predicted us to get relegated, and of course, it is going to be hella difficult for us to bring in any new players. Now, on our books, we have 2 players that are the best of the bunch, Thomas Lloyd and Jonathan Murphy. Thomas's best role is to play as a winger on support duty, while Jonathan is best used as a central attacking midfielder on support as well. Now, we want to play a possession-based game with a lot of short passing at a fairly decent tempo that will allow us to patiently build up attacks and score, hopefully, quite a few goals. Of course, on the other end of this, our primary aim for the season is definitely to avoid relegation. Now, being as cash-strapped as we are, it's going to be pretty difficult to get in new players before we get rid of some of the ones we have already. Now, with that in mind, we should probably base our tactical setup on the squad we already have. So we're going to start off by selecting our tactical style, and for our needs, control possession is probably the best. Now, each one of these will pop up a little bit of info that will allow you to make a choice a little bit easier. I'm going to go ahead and click control possession. Now, the next step is to make sure that we can put in our best players into this team. So we're going to start off by making this an attacking midfielder on support and bringing in a winger on support as well. So Thomas Lloyd will pop in there, and then we'll come down and find Jonathan Murphy and pop him in there as well. So we've got to start. So I'm going to go ahead and make my life a bit easier here. Click insert column, ability, assistant manager's opinion of the player's current ability. Now this is going to allow me to sort, as I already have done, by position, and then go through the ability ratings to make sure that the best players are in the starting 11. Now we've got one very good striker in Albi Shala. We can pop him in there. And then if we come down, we've also got a decent left winger in Chris Whitting. So we'll pop him there, and for a bit of symmetry, we'll go ahead and play him a bit further forward. Now, if I sort by ability, we're going to get a good idea as to how many of our really good players we're including in the starting 11. Now, we already have a little bit of a conundrum here. 2 more players that are really good playing out wide. One of them can only play on the right, and we're probably going to have to keep him on the bench just based on that. Luke Ellis-Flower, on the other hand, can play on the left, which might allow us to make a little bit of a shift here. We could move Albi Shala out to one side and bring Chris Whitting in as a second striker, which will then allow us to bring in Luke Ellis-Flower in on that left wing. Now this is becoming very attacking heavy. Nonetheless, we're going to stick with it for a second before optimizing at the end. I'll bring in Nicholas Cedric, who is pretty good playing at defensive midfield, and will switch his role up to be a ball-winning midfielder on defend that he actually prefers. We'll then go ahead and pop in Dodd at left back, Balmer at right back, Rastrick in the net, and Rogers at one of the centre backs, with only Alan Jones available to play at the other centre back. Now, this already highlights a little problem that we need to correct with our scouting and possible transfers in. But what we have here now is a basic little tactic. Now, if I click on this little analysis button to see what we have already, it's going to pop up a screen that looks like this. So each of these squares can be clicked on, and it will give you some information about the influence in those areas. So for example here, Albi Shala and Chris Whitting have a low positive influence by helping out in this area, whilst Jonathan Murphy has a very high positive influence and is responsible for this area of the pitch. Now the red spots tell you where your problems lie. As you can see from this one, there's a high negative influence. There's currently nobody directly responsible for this area of the pitch. Of course, Nicholas Cedric has a low positive influence, being stationed primarily in the center of the pitch. So how can we correct this? The first step would be to move around some of the player positions. So now we're going to go ahead and move back Jonathan Murphy into the central midfield role and ask him to come here and create a bit. So we can go ahead and pick his best role here as advanced playmaker on support. And then we can consider even bringing back Ellis-Flower and Lloyd. The problem then is that these players aren't particularly good in those areas. Now, if we click on analysis again, we'll see that it is ironing itself out somewhat. Of course, Alan Jones isn't a good centre back, so this area of the pitch is particularly problematic. We could perhaps go back and bring in a little bit of change here. We'll change Wooting from a deep lying forward on attack to a deep lying forward on support. And if we click on this again, we now see that it starts to look a little bit decent. The only real problem area of the pitch is adjacent to Cedric on either side. If we go back and move the positions around one more time, maybe bring Cedric in over there, we can click on analysis one more time and it already looks a lot better. And from this, at the very bare minimum, what we have is a fairly functioning tactic that we can use to get some sort of action out of this squad. Now, the next step in setting up this tactic would be to go into the tactical instructions. So we'll start off with our attacking width. Now, in the traditional sense, a 4-4-2 is used for its attacking wing play, often with a more direct style. We do want to control possession, however, and we're trying to make the best tactic for us with what we have at hand. Now, we're going to go ahead and drop the attacking width to fairly narrow, despite that being a bit counterintuitive for our wingers. What it will mean then is that the wingers sit a bit more narrow and in essence give us a little bit more support playing in the middle of the pitch. We're then going to change the passing directness to much shorter to ensure that the players keep it really simple and keep the ball moving. Now our tempo is set at slightly lower and we're going to leave it just there. If we put it all the way down, it might make for a very boring Louis van Gaal style of play. If we go all the way up, it's probably going to rush players into passes that they just can't make, especially with not much quality in the ranks. We're going to go back down and leave it at that. Now, we could also choose to focus a play down the wings to make sure that our wide players are primarily focused in our attacks and potentially even pass into space so that we can get them in behind. Now, the problem with that is it goes against our tactical identity very slightly in that playing through balls can often cost us possession. So for now, at the very outset, we're going to leave that out. We'll then go ahead and ask the players to run at defense so that we can get a little bit more penetration from those wide players and then also be a little bit more disciplined. Of course, we are managing a side that are not likely to win the league, but rather trying to stay very, very compact and trying to make sure that we do not get relegated, as was the brief. Now we'll retain the work ball into box instructions so that we can fit our brief. Of course, when we asked ourselves that question, we wanted to see patient build-up play where we measure it and consider our passes, eventually leading to some very nice chances created after knocking the ball around for a bit. Now we'll move on to how we play in the transition. So this is already preset with the control possession tactical style, and of course taking shorter kicks and distributing to the backline is a primary way of ensuring that you don't lose the ball very easily. We could also go ahead and distribute to our fullbacks, who should have some support from the wingers on the flanks, and hopefully they can get the ball progressed down the flanks a little bit faster. Now we can move on to our pressing, and when possession has been lost, do we want to counter press or regroup? Now with a 4-4-2 and not much cover in midfield with our one player set on a support duty in an advanced playmaker role, we're probably going to be a little bit better off going into regroup rather than counter press. Now this will allow us to sit back in a fairly low block to stay a little bit compact, and we'll get to that in the out of possession instructions. Now when possession has been won, do we want to counter or hold shape? Our tactical style dictates to us that we want to retain possession quite well and build up play quite slowly. So we'll go ahead and click hold shape. When the goalkeeper is in possession, do we want him to distribute quickly or slow the pace down? Now, I don't think we're going to see much value in distributing quickly, as our tactical style yet again is to play slow and patient. So we're not going to do too much to that. Let him distribute as he sees fit, and we can move on to our out of possession instructions. Now based on our brief yet again, we're going to go ahead and set up our defensive shape to ensure that we are quite compact. Now setting up our defensive shape, we do need to still keep in mind the brief. We want to stay as compact as we can, and a high defensive line isn't something that's going to aid that. We're going to drop this down to lower just to make sure that we have a bank of four sitting in front of our goal, ready to thwart away attacks as they come in. A mid block can be retained so that we keep the play a little bit more expansive, so that when we do get the ball, we can knock around the ball in a few triangles here and there and try and progress it forward. We might, however, benefit from going a little bit deeper in a low block, because we just aren't that good compared to the rest of the league, as we can tell from the media prediction at the start of the season. Now, as part of us being difficult to beat, it might be valuable to get stuck in and drop off a bit more just to retain some players behind the ball and make sure that we go in with a little bit of steel to try and win it back. We also have some fair cover playing deep in the midfield, so we can go ahead and trap inside, and then as a whole maybe stop crosses as well, because we don't have the greatest centre backs in place that will win everything in the air. So what we have here is a 4-4-2 that attempts to retain possession quite well and slowly, patiently develop attacks while staying defensively sound. Now we can change this mentality to positive or cautious or attacking or defensive based on the match situation, and I find that starting off with balanced allows you to assess exactly how the game is going in the first 15 to 20 minutes. If it's going really well and you seem to be doing particularly well, you can slowly progress up, going from positive all the way up to very attacking. If things aren't working particularly well, you could drop all the way down to defensive and then maybe change up the passing directness to switch up to a counter. Now this is a basic way to set up a tactic with what you already have at hand in a playing style that is something that you would like to see, whilst also making sure that you get closer to achieving your goals. Now, as with most things in life, you're probably going to have to make a few sacrifices and compromise on one end of the spectrum. For example, this style of play is not particularly balanced. Controlling possession while also trying to stay very deep in a block, I don't think it's going to work that well. With the players we have at hand, it might be more beneficial to sacrifice a bit in terms of style of play and go ahead and play a counter-attacking style of football. That'll allow us to stay defensively compact while exploiting the pace of our wingers and our forwards to get in on the counter and score an odd goal here or there that might allow us to sneak a few wins and over the course of the season get enough points to make sure that we save relegation. Of course, that is our primary goal in terms of our aims. Now, over time, you could possibly bring in players to suit the role that you actually want the team to be playing, and then maybe progress more towards your tactical style. On the other hand, maybe your tactical identity is the most important thing too. Maybe you get most joy playing the game, watching your team play exactly the style that you want them to play, and you can, to some extent, compromise on the results. You could do this and over time use the data hub and otherwise, like we did, to optimize the tactics so that you get the desirable results. As I said earlier, you're going to have to compromise one way or the other until you get to the very top tier and you have all the resources at hand and you can go and sign players willy-nilly. It might be quite hard to have exactly what you want in terms of a tactical style that is fluid and attacking or very, very pleasing on the eye that gets results in every single match. Now, with all that said, FM is still a game, and the best way to get results is by giving the match engine what it wants to see. There are certain few things that you could use to your advantage for the match engine to give you the most reward for your tactical decisions. And whilst considering the 3 important questions you've asked yourself, you can include these things into your team and tactical dynamics to make sure that you get a little bit closer to the middle of that spectrum that we just spoke about. Now, in the links in the description, you'll find one to FM Arena. This is not an ad for them and the video is not sponsored, of course, but the place is an absolute treasure trove. There's been so much good work put into testing tactics and testing player roles and testing otherwise to see what works best in terms of the match engine. Now, looking at their testing, there's a few things that work better in this edition of FM. In your in-possession instruction, the game seems to favor a very high tempo. It also seems to like passing into space when you're not using the Tiki-Taka tactic, which for some reason is quite broken in this edition of FM. Running at the defense is also something that will get you good reward. On the other end of the pitch, playing with a high press seems to also get you much better results and over the course of the season, more points. Along with this, getting stuck in and tackling harder, which is something that you can set on the opposition instructions in game, is also very desirable. Now, to close off all of this tactical talk, let's go through a few examples of other tactical setups where we can find out how to tailor our tactical instructions. Of course, in your head as of current, you've now found a way to develop a tactic that is going to suit your playing style, your tactical identity, and meet the goals that you want to. Of course, over time, based on the results that you are getting, use the data hub and other stats to try and manipulate it a bit, make subtle changes, and keep tinkering. Ultimately, FM is very often about the long haul and putting in just a bit of work every now and then into your tactic, constantly evolving. You're probably going to get to a point where you're winning a lot and really enjoying playing the game.
I'll start off with a park the bus type system, then move on to something more fluid with quick short passing and attacking play, and then lastly look at something a little bit more direct. So we're going to start off with a clean slate yet again, and of course this time our first team squad on the right here, so we can go ahead and select some better players in the positions. We're going to go ahead and click on park the bus. And of course, this is a tactical style that is primarily used when you really just need to defend. Perhaps in your lower league save, you're coming up against some big bad opposition in the FA Cup, maybe a Premier League outfit, and you don't want to embarrass yourselves. You don't want to get some stick off the fans, and you want to go home with some dignity intact. Now, 4-4-2 is a pretty good way to go about defending quite neatly. You can set yourselves up in two banks of four that allow you to defend quite deep with a lot of cover afforded to any potential attacks. Now we're going to go ahead here and use a low block and a much lower defensive line. Get stuck in as you would when you're trying to defend the crap out of the game. Stop the crosses, and hopefully your center backs can go ahead and help you by nodding anything that comes in out as well. And then also drop off more so that no deep runs can be made in behind with a long ball knocked over the top. By trapping outside and stopping the crosses, you can ensure that less of the ball is going to be at the focal point of perhaps a center forward or an attacking midfield that is likely to do significant damage. Now you can trigger the press as much as you want, but perhaps less often will allow you to retain your shape a bit better. Of course, in terms of defending, shape is vital. Now, preventing short distribution of the goalkeeper is not going to be very valuable because you're probably not going to find yourselves very high up the pitch. Going into the transition, like I just said, you're going to want to regroup more than you counter press. You can hold shape when possession has been won so that you don't give it off too often, or you could choose to use your park the bus like Jose Mourinho and counter more often than not. Now, this is going to influence how you deal with your tempo in the game, what you do in possession. So if you're going to go ahead and counter, you probably want to be as direct as possible. Of course, countering with a bunch of slow, short passes is going to take really long to get up the pitch. And the idea with a counter attack is to beat the opposition by getting in behind the defensive line much quicker than they can regroup. By exploiting space in this way, you're likely to score goals just based on sheer numbers in attack. Maybe you'll find yourselves breaking through the lines really quickly, getting into a 3v1 situation where the players create a very clear-cut chance for once and actually take it. Now, if you've got pacey forwards up top with decent anticipation and off-the-ball movement, you're probably going to be able to persist with the hit early crosses. They're going to be able to get into spaces before the defenders are allowed to regroup, and thus results in more clear-cut chances. Of course, if you don't, it might be better to go ahead and click shoot on sight and remove the hit early crosses. Maybe you want to be a little bit more patient, and once you get into some sort of decent shooting range, go ahead and take a pop. Of course, if you're going to go ahead and try and play on the counter, you do have to be mindful of the tempo. If you play with an extremely low tempo, you're not going to be able to counter in the way that I just described. Converse to that, if you go extremely high, you're probably going to lose the ball more often than not. So you do have to balance this somewhat. For now, I'm going to go ahead and bring that back down to a slightly lower tempo. Bring this one down all the way to slightly shorter. Go back here to in transition and change this to hold your shape because of course we're trying to defend here. Then back in the in possession tactics, we'll go ahead and say play out of defense just to make sure that we retain the ball a bit and time waste whenever possible. Of course, the earlier the game ends and the less goals we concede, probably going to be better for it. We'll dribble less so that we don't lose the ball as much, and our attacking width will be fairly narrow for now. Of course, that could vary depending on where your biggest attacking threats lie. So if we come out of this and just quick pick for now, we'll get something that looks like this. And this is a fairly decent 4-4-2 that is likely to be somewhat good in defending for us when we come up against a big team. Now, the next style we're going to look at is something a bit more expansive, a vertical tiki-taka. I did mention that the tiki-taka is broken, but the vertical tiki-taka is not. And it's something that allows you to play a lot of possession football, but a bit more expansive, a bit more direct and to the point, trying to progress the ball up the field in vertical lines as fast as you can. Now we're going to start off with our center forward set on advanced forward on attack. This role has worked particularly well in FM over as many editions as I can remember. The inside forwards have also been traditionally very good. Of course, in our save here, we've changed over to inverted wingers as of late, as for the reasons I mentioned in that episode. Now we're going to start off regardless with inside forwards and an advanced playmaker on support. Now the defensive midfielders can be set however you'd like, a ball wing midfielder and a DM or a deep line playmaker. But I think for this example, we're going to go ahead and use a segundo volante on support, and then a anchorman set on defense. So the anchorman's primary role here is going to be to make sure that he can stymie any attacks that come in. The segundo volante, on the other hand, acts like a box-to-box midfielder, but traditionally sitting a bit deeper, with his main focus being defending. He will arrive late into the box and make progressive runs when he can, and that should provide some support as a link between our defense and the advanced playmaker and the attack. Now, depending on the players you have available to you, you could go ahead and leave the wide players set on fullbacks and support. Or if you're lucky to have much better players in terms of the attacking, you can go ahead and change them to wingbacks on support. That'll allow them to get a bit further forward and be a bit more expansive, allowing you to transition the ball vertically with much more ease. If you are also lucky enough to have good ball-playing centre-backs, you can go ahead and set them on that as well. Now, going ahead into the instructions, the mentality for this type of setup is probably going to be better, slightly more attacking. With a positive start, you could then go ahead and change to attacking or a little bit more balanced if it isn't working out too well in the game. In possession, you will traditionally want to sit fairly narrow so that the players have more triangles to complete quick passes through. And then traditionally, it's also set to focus the play through the middle. Now, me, if I had to set up this tactic, I will ensure that my fullbacks overlap on the right and the left. Of course, it's going to change to custom vertical tiki-taka now. This will allow us to have a bit of variability or variety in our attacks. We will also make sure that we always work the ball into the box and pass much shorter at a lower tempo. Now, you can go ahead and change this tempo to slightly higher, and this will fit the bill for what I was describing to you earlier. A very expansive tactic that pushes the ball forward and is quite attacking and pleasing on the eye. You can also run at defense to make sure that those inside forwards get into areas where they challenge the defense and maybe free up some space for the center forward. Based on your capabilities, you could possibly play for set pieces and change up how you cross into the final third. And then I'm going to go ahead here and also click on pass into space. This will fit the bill in terms of using our pacey inside forwards and center forward to get in behind, and hopefully with some killer passes from the advanced playmaker, we should be getting some results. In transition, we're going to try and counter press as often as we can. Much like the gegenpress, when we win the ball back, we do want to progress it very fast up the field so that we can break through the lines quite easily as players are found out of position. Now, I will also go ahead in my system here asking the goalkeeper to distribute quickly so that we can focus on the slightly higher tempo of football and also distribute to our fullbacks, which in this case are wingbacks. So we're going to get some wide play from them whilst our inside forwards tuck in, and hopefully we create a little system where the ball is spread out from the back quickly up the field into the advanced areas through the lines in quick fashion, and then gets to our striker and it gets slotted in the net. So hopefully this type of thing will create some very, very pleasing football that possibly will get some good results. Now, if you have good players, which is most likely the scenario you're going to use this type of formation in, you're probably going to be spanking stuff up at the top of the league. Now, out of possession, like we already have in our current formation that we have set, we're going to go with a higher press so that we can win the ball back fairly high. Of course, if you do retain the higher defensive line, you need to ensure that you have some fairly pacey center backs or fullbacks that can help them cover. We could potentially drop this to standard or even lower to make sure that we have a larger playing area. By asking the opposition to cover a wider area, we're probably going to have a few more gaps that we can penetrate through. We're going to step up more so that we can win the ball back slightly higher rather than dropping off and sitting in a low block and then trap inside it again. You could ask them to invite crosses or stop crosses based on how confident you are with your center back. I'm going to say stop crosses in this rendition of the tactic. And as we mentioned in the things that work slightly better, getting stuck in is going to help. Despite us not playing a heavily defensive tactic, getting stuck in does seem to work just a bit better in the game. Now, if we go back and quick pick here and see what we have going for us, we're going to get something that looks like this. Of course, the game has decided that Josh Hassan should be starting at the advanced playmaker. You're going to end up with something that hopefully is quite fluid, quite attacking. I don't think it'll work perfectly well for us in this situation. We do have some minor flaws that we need to overcome with our current tactic. So if we click on the analysis here, you'll see that we will have a little bit of an issue with our central midfield, and that is something that we tried to counter with our current tactical selection as well. Let's move on to the last one, This is a bit of a throwback tactic in what I still consider a 4-4-2. Of course, the wingers have been pushed slightly forward, so it is a 4-2-4, and we're going to be playing on wing play. We have a target forward on support to hopefully hold up the ball quite well, draw some defenders, and maybe even nod a few over the top for a poacher set on attack to run onto and slot for us. Now we have a box-to-box midfielder sitting in the middle with a ball-winning midfielder sitting next to him on defend to hopefully cut out any counter-attacks that come. Two fullbacks on support to support those wingers, and as we'll go into our in-possession tactics, we'll make sure that they overlap on the left and right, and we focus our play primarily on the wings. Now, as it is a wing play tactic, we're going to attack very wide and pass into space so that those wingers can run onto the ball and whoop some crosses in. Now, depending on how confident you are with your strikers, you can go ahead and hit some early crosses here. Of course, you can't then work the ball into the box. And if you have a really tall target man, maybe a 1.9 lad like Fraser Calvo we have in the youth side, you could go ahead and say whoop those crosses or float the crosses in so that he could beat everyone in the air. Now, running at the defense is vital for this tactic. And of course, whilst it is a very, very attacking tactic, you do want to be somewhat disciplined so that the players go ahead and retain some sort of shape. Now, interestingly, on FM Marina's testing of the creative freedom, be more expressive was kind of counterintuitive. It actually resulted in less goals than be more disciplined or no instruction over the course of a season. Now we'll move over to the in-transition instructions, and over here we're going to make sure that we counter once we win possession. We're going to try and distribute quickly so that we move the ball quite fast out of the defense, and maybe even take longer kicks now that we have a big target forward sitting up top. Of course, we will distribute to the flanks when we can, and when possession has been lost, I'm not too concerned about that. Of course, counter-pressing might be a bit of an issue here. With a forward-heavy tactic like this, you might leave far too much space for the defense to compensate for. So I'm going to leave that as is, or even maybe click on regroup to make sure that these players retreat and give us a little bit more cover defensively. Now, out of possession, we're going to go ahead and leave this on mid-block. We don't need to press too high up the pitch. We're relying on us getting the ball somewhere around the midfield and progressing it far forward. By pressing too high, we might create far too much space between our attacking and defensive line. And if we don't win the ball back, it's going to be really easy for the opposition to play through the lines. Now, to give us a bit more defensive solidity, we're going to go ahead again and say get stuck in. We're going to drop off a bit more here when we're defending because, as I said, we don't want to step up too much. And then trap outside this time and stop all the crosses. So we can leave the trigger press on much more often, but I think in my case, I'm going to go ahead and leave it on standard so that the players retain shape quite well. Of course, when we're defending, it would be nice to retain a fairly solid 4-4-2 shape with one bank of 4 sitting very deep and then a second bank of 2 or 3, depending on who tucks in, to hold fort there as well. And the one thing that I forgot to change in the in-possession tactics is we're currently playing with a slightly higher tempo. We're going to go ahead and make sure that that is super high. So once we get the ball back, we're going to be flying up the pitch and hopefully get a lot of goals. So I said this was a throwback, and it reminds me of a time when football seemed somewhat better. But yeah, that is that for our basics on setting up your own tactic. Now, of course, you really need to get stuck in there and tinker with it as much as you can. When you get to a point where results are flowing and the football is looking like exactly what you wanted, you could go ahead and just retain. Stop doing anything different until some sort of problem arises. And it will, this is FM, at some point in your season, there's going to be a little blip where things aren't going perfectly. Use the data hub then and then make slight subtle changes that will correct for the errors. In the future, at some point, we'll definitely look at creating a tactic that is something close to meta. But for now, most of what I've said is based on you creating a tactic that you can enjoy watching and get good results with regardless. Creating a tactic that feels like your very own. And the benefit to this is you're going to truly understand what your tactical system is over time as you refine that. Now, what that will allow you to do is that when you go ahead looking for players, you're going to be able to sign players that suit your system to a T. You might not be able to get the best players in at the lower league level, but as you progress further, hopefully when this tactic is absolutely refined at the top tier, you're going to go ahead and be able to sign the perfect player for each position. And hopefully then when you win the quadruple, it will feel like you've absolutely done it. All your fantasies and all your dreams have come true. You are an FM legend and you've absolutely bossed it. I hope that you've taken something out of my approach to creating tactics for myself, and hopefully you can implement that into your save and ultimately enjoy your Football Manager experience even more. Of course, don't be dissuaded if it isn't working at first. The age-old football conundrum is style versus results, and at some point you're going to find the perfect balance with that and create the tactic that works perfectly for you. Now, with all of that out the way, let's head back to the league as we take on Hereford. So here we go then, and as you can see, we are not taking on Hereford anymore. That game was postponed because of a waterlogged pitch. Now, same old story, this happened at some point last season as well. Now we take on South Shields away this time, and the lineup is pretty much as you have seen quite a bit. We do start Roy Deacon in at left wing. As you can see, I've also gone ahead and made a few tactical changes to our system here as well. Of course, the tinkering never ends. You've got to keep trying to get better in order for your tactic to eventually become something that you really want to see. Now, I've gone ahead and, as you can see, it says custom gegenpress now, no more custom tiki-taka, and our out of possession instructions have changed slightly. So I've currently got this thing set on slightly more often in terms of triggering the press, and I'll show you why. If I go ahead and set this to much more often, as I would actually like it, and I go ahead to the player instructions, I'll click on someone like Roy Deacon here on the left and click on edit. And you'll see here that his natural tendency now is to trigger the press less often. We did want our players to go ahead and press higher up the pitch, and this has become a little bit of an issue. If I go back, cancel to overview again, change this out of possession instruction from much more often to slightly more often, go back to play instructions, click on Roy Deacon again. I'll be able to edit this now, and as you can see, trigger press more often. So I'm not sure if that's something that is broken within the game. I'm going to have to see how we respond to this. If the forwards actually press more than they have been in the past. If they do, then hey presto, we've won with this one. Now I'm going to go back and just show you one more thing that we've changed. So if we come here to out of possession, we've also decided to step up a bit more to encourage that higher press. And we're going to go ahead and do it in front of you and say get stuck in, because we do want to be tackling harder, as I just said very recently in the approach to setting up your own tactic. Now let's jump into this one against South Shields, and hopefully we get a few more goals than we have been in the recent past. I'll catch you on the sideline. So South Shields come into this one with their 4-4-2 on the back of some really poor form. Just one win in the last 5, 3 losses and a draw. Now hopefully we can start this one in some good fashion and get some goals, as I've been saying on repeat. Some good early possession here now, and the keeper's done a bit of a weird there. Won back by Ezenolum and now Deacon. We won the ball back high up the pitch like we asked our guys to, and can Pennington do something with this now? Finds Josh Smith, back to Pennington, a big shot, high and over. So yet another attack there, and Josh Smith finds it, back to Ezenolum. Bad pass there, and the counter might be on. Won back really nicely by Levi Ando, out to Terry Rowe and then Pennington. Whipped over the top, rather aimlessly there, but we do recycle yet again. Ezenolum now, Roy Deacon, deflected shot, corner. The corner then, and can we finally muster a shot on target? Not a dart to Levi Ando, who recycles very deep to Deacon. This is probably going to break to nothing, and it does. It's a good early possession, as I said. 5 shots now, 1 on target. Nothing clear-cut created thus far, and we are just going to give the guys a little bit of a firing up, and hopefully they go ahead and take the game to South Shields. Pennington with a free kick, rocketed off the wall, and a corner yet again. Bowman Clark whoops in. Not an out. Levi Ando breaks to nothing yet again. So nothing doing early on here. It's been decent, but we just haven't created any clear-cut chances thus far. And now South Shields with the ball deep into their half. Comes out to Levi Ando, and then Rowe beaten to it. Won back by Nixon, and now Josh Smith. Some good quick passing. And the ball has been knocked around very nicely there now. Rowe finds Bowman Clark yet again in space. Can he find a pass? Cuts it back out to Josh Smith, and he breaks to Rowe, then Pennington. That was something of a wasted chance, I would think. It's gone all the way back to the defense. So nice neat play, but then just not finding the final pass. Roy Deacon gets it back on that left wing. He beats his man really nicely, and he slots home 1-0. We managed to keep that attack alive for long enough to get 1. So Wall now with a big ball up top. Not sure why, because we're supposed to be starting our attacks from the back. But anyway, it's come to Rowe. Now Pennington. A lot of ball for the lads in midfield thus far, and a poor pass that Nixon does well to find first. Can he whip one in here? He does. Beaten everyone there. Now back to Deacon and then Pennington. Now Teddy Rowe with a lovely little effort. Bombed away by Cameron. It's another corner now and a half, and it find a head. Goes big long towards the far post as he was asked, but nothing doing, and we're going to get to half time at 1-0. Oh, whoa. Now another chance developing on the left wing. Rory Deacon being heavily involved early. Good early ball to Alamanji. He misses his header. He comes back out to Teddy Rowe now. Finding Nixon yet again in space. He's going to have a pop. He does, and he does to great effect. An overlapping run there. Brilliant stuff. Slotted in the top corner. 2-0. So late into the half here, and maybe a chance for South Shields to get one back. Wow. Out of nothing. A nothing strike. Ubeazuno, or however the hell you say his name, has slotted in. Dennis Wall beaten through a crowd there. Wowza. The thick deflection. And a goal. It's off an XG of 0.07. South Shields have grabbed one back. We'll go into the second half with not many changes and see what comes up. So the goal scorer goes off early into the second half, and can we find a few more goals now? We did concede. Hopefully it stops at that just one. Deacon loses the ball cheaply. So Dennis Wall finds Ricketts there and a quick pass out wide. Now Teddy Rowe deep into our half and finding Josh Smith with ease. Can he find the ball through the lines out to Beaumont Clark? Almost finding Alamanji there. A ball whipped out wide to Deacon and he slots again. Brilliant stuff. So we're getting through the lines quite nicely. 3-1 up, and as we wanted, a few more goals, and it's working out almost perfectly bar that one we conceded. We're going to give the lads a few more minutes and then go ahead and make a few more changes. Perhaps after this attack, Beaumont Clark on the edge here. Can he find the finish? Oh, off the bar. The two subs then, Jack Barr and Leo Black coming on. I've decided to give Teddy Rowe a bit of a rest. He was also on a yellow, so let's just let him sit out for now. Barr coming in on the right wing for Beaumont Clark. A few yellows being picked up as was expected with the get stuck in instruction. 14 shots thus far, just 6 on target. And we find another goal, or we concede one more now. Pennington doing a bit of a naughty there, but not getting called for it. Alamanji goes out wide to Barr, who knocks the ball all the way across to Rory Deacon, who's been having a wonderful game. That time he puts it high and wide. I've let Alamanji play most of this game. We'll give the last 5 to Henry Landers and see if he can come up with a goal. Alamanji hasn't been in the greatest form as of late, and we might need to make him sit on the bench just a bit more. Just a couple minutes away from full time then, and a decent result all told here. Or will we concede another one and make it look a little bit more ugly? Nodded out. George doesn't look to be doing much, but now it's Fan Mary. Claimed very nicely by Dennis Wall. That should see us seal this as a 3-1 victory. Not too bad. Definitely an improvement in terms of the attacking spaces. Not much larger XG than we have been seeing throughout the season, but 15 shots. We've done some things there with a decent amount of possession, 57% of that. And yet again, another good day at the office. So all in all, I hope that you really enjoyed this episode. If you did, please don't forget to drop us a like and hit the subscribe button and the notification button to stay tuned for everything that is to come. Now, I did drop a poll in the community tab just to check what you guys want to see going forward in terms of the format of these episodes. If you haven't already, please pop over there, spend a few seconds, just click on an option that you would prefer to see. Now, the plan is for me to play a few more games behind the scenes, and then in the next episode, get stuck into some scouting as we get closer to the end of the season. Hopefully I'll be able to drop in a few tricks and tips that you might not know already about scouting in the lower leagues. Until the next one, please take care and laka check you. Bye!